Hey everybody, welcome back. It's been a while. I've had kind of a crazy life going on the past couple months, but things are finally starting to settle down, and I'm going to do a case for you guys today. But before we get into that, I have a little bit of sad news. The little pug y'all always heard snoring in the background, Abby, she passed away a couple weeks ago, and so yeah, that's been a little rough, but for now, as a tribute, I got me a little stuffy that looks just like her, reminds me of her, and she'll be hanging out with me on the desk. So even though you can't hear her, Abby will be with us in spirit. And yeah, that was sudden and out of the blue and kind of rough, but it that's how it goes. Oh, anyway, let's move on to the case. I don't want to keep everybody too long from it. Um, Today I'm going to be working on one of my own original art pieces, hopefully. I know the light's kind of bouncing off of it a little bit, but maybe you can... I'm trying to get my angles right here in the camera. Sorry, guys. But yeah, this is it. It's a piece I drew myself. It's a skeleton with butterfly wings, because why not? Doesn't really go along with our case that much today, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's what I picked. Today's case, if you clicked on it, I'm sure you saw, is going to be Lizzie Borden. I figured, why not? You know, it's an old enough crime that, you know, it fits within my range and everything, and everybody else has covered it, so why not me too? So, we'll get into it and hopefully have a good time. Let me color in this little area here. Alright, so Lizzie's full name is Lizzie Andrew Borden. Andrew is her father's name, so it's kind of like she was named after him. Anyway, she was born July 19th, 1860, and she was born in Fall River, Massachusetts. Now, Lizzie did come from a wealthy family, but her father was said to be quite tight with money. So even though a lot of houses at the time had running water and electricity, theirs did not. He didn't see the need for it. Lizzie has a sister, and I'm sorry, I need to get my notes. Emma. Yes, sorry. I wanted to say Emily, but I knew that wasn't right. So her sister Emma, and her mother and father lived in this house of theirs. And when Lizzie was about 2, her mother Sarah Borden died tragically. Very sad. And her father would go on to remarry a woman named Abby, and we'll get to her in a minute, but we'll talk about their father first. So he was, had his, fingers in lots of pots, let's just say. He manufactured furniture and caskets, and he owned some textile mills, and he was also like trustee and president on a couple of different banks. So, he had sources of income. Even though he was pretty cheap, he was also known to kind of spoil the girls, which, that's good. They both seem to be daddy's girls, which, I think that they really leaned on him after their mother died. And, but they were also, it sounds like they could both be a little entitled and bratty, but they wanted things that he didn't want. They wanted to live in a more modern house, in a more prominent area of town where the wealthier people lived, but Andrew didn't see a need for all that, and so I think the girls were kind of miffed about not being able to live in a trendy new home and all that kind of stuff. But we'll talk about a couple of instances where he did, you know, spoil them and give them things and things like that. So it's not as if he didn't provide for them. He did. And keep in mind, Lizzie, at the time we're talking about here, Lizzie and Emma are both grown women. Neither has ever married, so they're still at home with their mother and or father and stepmother. But neither one has ever married, and I mean, at the time, as a woman, your job was to get married, and if you didn't ever do that, then you were probably wealthy and you could afford to live off your parents. Your parents could afford to support you because, you know, they wouldn't have wanted women, unmarried women especially, to have jobs. So let's see. Andrew was worth about $300,000 in 1892. Today, that adjusted for inflation would be about $10 million today. So, pretty wealthy family. You know, they didn't flash it though. Or, well, Andrew didn't flash it. Sorry. Getting to where I'm going in my notes. I'm so out of practice, you guys. I'm so sorry. I'm going to try to get back in the swing of things. While I was out, I was writing scripts, so I have a bunch of scripts ready to go. So I'm going to try to churn out some episodes after work today, which is Wednesday, and then Saturday I hope to record another and have it out for you sometime Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening, but we're going to focus on this one today. Alright, so, you know, that brings us to the family. Let's see. We've got Lizzie and her older sister Emma, who's about 2 years older than her. Excuse me. No, I'm wrong there. I'm definitely wrong there. About 9 years older than her. Yes, 9 years. That's a pretty big discrepancy, and forgive me. Like I said, I've been writing all these scripts, and the Lizzie Borden script was one I wrote kind of earlier, and I wrote about 11 or so after that, so I should have read through this better before I started, but I didn't, and here we are. So anyway, Emma is about 9 years older than Lizzie, and so that's Lizzie, her older sister Emma, her father, and her stepmother Abby all live in this home, as well as a maid, and we'll get to her in a minute. Now, it was said that they had a sort of cordial relationship, the girls did, with Abby, but they called her Mrs. Borden. Some sources say that that was just kind of how it went, and some say that had been like a recent development in the last couple of years due to a falling out. So, I'll let you, just decide for yourself which one it was. And I'm sure if you're watching this, you're familiar with the Lizzie Borden story, but if not, well, it's about to get crazy. Okay. So, in the weeks leading up to the murders, there seemed to be some tension in the family. Andrew was giving gifts of, like, real estate and money to some of Abby's family, which Emma and Lizzie did not like. They felt he was giving away their inheritance, which, I mean, that's one way to look at it, but even if you're the child of wealth, you're not entitled to your parents' money, especially after you're grown. I mean, of course, you're entitled to their support while you're a minor, but once you're an adult, you're not entitled to anybody's money. But Lizzie and Emma sure felt they were. And it wasn't just Abby's family he was giving these kinds of larger gifts to. It was also her maternal uncle, who would have been their mother's brother. It looked like there was some sort of business dealings going on between him and Andrew, as well as being given a property of some kind. And Emma and Lizzie seem to be pretty upset about this for whatever reason. And I mean, we don't know the ins and the outs of the family dynamic and everything like that. So maybe they were being entitled brats, or maybe there was more to it. Who knows? But it did seem to be something that people noticed. Now the Bordens weren't like a super super social family, but they did have friends, and they did, have people that they interacted with and all that. So, some people who knew the family seemed to say this later on, that there had been building tension over these real estate and monetary gifts in the weeks prior to the murders. So keep that in your back pocket for now. I'm gonna fill this in. I'm trying to decide on the biggest part of the wings here. If I'm going to do that in a pastel or a colored pencil, just because, I don't know. Colored pencil will take longer. I honestly think a pastel will look better because it'll have that, like, glowing effect. So I'll probably end up doing it in a pastel, but I'm going to do it in a darker color, I think, so that the bright colors can pop off the page. Because I know right now on my camera screen it looks kind of hard to see, but whenever I go to look at it in editing, it's pretty visible. I'm going to be getting a new camera once I get my income tax and some more lighting. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but I will just say that when I started this, I had 2 ring lights and an LED desk lamp, and I think I used the one ring light twice before it crapped out, and then shortly after that the LED desk lamp crapped out. So now I'm down to 1 ring light and this like little tiny clip-on desk lamp that has like a more yellowy bulb. So my lighting's kind of different this time, so please forgive me. I'm thinking when I get paid out of this next paycheck, I might buy another ring light. They're not too expensive, and I definitely need it. Anyway, enough technical issues. So, back to the Borden home. It seems that, like, Lizzie and Emma both, they traveled quite a bit and went to stay with friends and went out of town and all of that quite a bit. So it was probably a good respite for Abby, because it sounds like she kind of put up with a lot of crap from these girls. Because Abby was by no means a gold digger or anything. She was quite wealthy in her own right, and she was the niece of one of the guys that worked on the board with the one of the banks that Andrew was, I don't know, working with, whatever. So, Abby came with her own money too. So I don't know if they were, "You're not my real mom," kind of resentful, or if they were, "Oh, she's just gold digging," resentful. I don't know. We won't know, because that was just kind of the things polite society didn't discuss back then. So, they're all living in this really contentious household and all that. Now, the childhood home that Emma and Lizzie grew up in, they demanded Andrew give that to them. And this is a really weird, like, I don't understand this deal at all, other than to appease Emma and Lizzie. So he sells it to them for $1, the property, their childhood home. And they keep it in their ownership for a few weeks, And then they sell it back to him for $5,000 just a few weeks later, which I didn't adjust for inflation, but $5,000 back then is going to be like, I don't know, like probably more than 60 grand today. Who knows? An inflation calculator knows, but I'm not going to stop coloring and look that up. If you're curious, I'll let you do some homework on that. Anyway, so that's a weird deal. Like they kind of throw a little temper tantrum at him for the house. He gives it to them for $1, and then they turn around and sell it back to him a few weeks later for 5 grand. Now, was this some way to give them a good chunk of change and avoid taxes or something like that? I do not know. It might have some practical, um, you know, business savvy way of the reason they did it. I don't know, but that's just a weird thing. I don't know anything about real estate in 1892 or whatever year it is, which we'll get to here in a second. So anyway, like that's a few weeks before the murders, and so who knows if that had something to do with some of the tension in the house or if it was other things. But anyway, it had gotten so bad that both Emma and Lizzie had left the house to go stay with friends for a few weeks, and Lizzie had only returned home about 4 days before the murders, and she had returned to town. She didn't return home immediately. She actually stayed in a boarding house for a little while before she went home, but she was in town. And by all accounts, she could have gone home whenever she wanted, and she eventually did, I believe, the night before the murders. So she is home in the house, but Emma is still out of town, and she will remain so for a little bit longer. So she's out of the house, and it's just Lizzie, Abby and Andrew, and the maid, and then their uncle. Where's his name? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Anyway, their uncle comes to stay with them the night before the murders, because he's going to, I guess, he has another niece in town he wants to visit. He has some business there, and he wants to discuss some other business with Andrew. And so he is staying in the Borden home for the night. And he does. Now, a couple of days before the murders, the household had been pretty ill. Not Lizzie, because she hadn't been there, but Abby, Andrew, and the maid. And the reason was believed that they had been left some. Now, in sources I've heard it was mutton stew, and then in other sources I've heard it was fish stew. So some kind of stew had been left on the stove for 3 days, and they had just been kind of heating it up and eating from it. And we know now that that's how botulism happens, when you don't properly preserve food and then it sits there for days and days, heating up and cooling down. So that was probably what made them ill. But Abby had gone across the street to the doctor that lived across the street there and seen him for her stomach ailments, and she had told him she thought she had been poisoned. And he thought she was kind of overreacting, and then he asked her about what they had been eating and all that, and she told him about the soup, and he kind of chuckled and said, well, that's why y'all are all sick. Nobody's been poisoned except for the food poisoning. And so, Abby went home, and I guess she was a little bit, probably half relieved and then half disappointed that the doctor didn't believe her. And we still don't know if that ever happened. Like, if they were poisoned. It doesn't seem so. It seemed like it was a little bit of paranoia on Abby's part, but after what happens next, perhaps justified paranoia. So, this is all happening August 3rd, 1892, is whenever Lizzie's uncle comes to stay, and Lizzie returns home. So they have dinner that night together, and then everybody goes off to bed. And this is going to kind of just be a little timeline I'm going to read through about the events of the morning of August 4th, because that's the most important day. How's that looking, guys? What do y'all think? Okay, I guess I should color. I'm gonna do hot pink. This is gonna be pretty. Yeah, I like that. That's gonna look nice. I have to color these in down here so I don't accidentally color the wrong lines in, because I have terrible astigmatism and lines just sort of blur together for me. Alright, so we're the morning of August 4th, 1892, and so far it's just a normal hot ass day. I'm sorry, I'm gonna turn back for just a second. The maid Bridget Sullivan was her name. That's the maid's name. Everyone called her Maggie except Andrew. He called her Bridget. Why did everyone else, all the women in the house, call her Maggie? Well, Maggie was the name of the previous maid, and I guess Abby and Emma and Lizzie just couldn't be bothered to learn this new woman's name. So that's rude, and pretty, like, I don't know, condescending. And it seems like, Bridget had been there for a while, not like 10 years or anything, but she had been there quite a while in their employ. So even though it sounds like Andrew was kind of a miserly, penny pincher, he at least had enough respect for the maid to learn her actual name, and even went so far as to call her by it. Wow, that's incredible. I just thought that was kind of interesting, that, like, he was the only one in the house that showed this woman enough common decency as to call her by her actual name and not the name of her predecessor. But anyway, so we're back to the morning. It's well, you know what? Let's skip back. I'm sorry, I skipped a whole thing on the timeline of August 3rd, other than Lizzie coming home and her uncle showing up. Like I said, haven't looked at this script since I wrote it a couple weeks ago. Should have read through it first before I jumped in, but I wanted to get this video made so that I can get it posted. Anyway, so August 3rd, day before the murders, 8 a.m., that's whenever Abby and Andrew are feeling ill. That's when, she goes to the doctor, but we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so 8 a.m. is whenever Abby is feeling ill, and she goes over across the street to Dr. Bowen's house, and, she's not feeling well. He tells her, oh, you've been eating bad food. She goes home. Between 9 and 10 p.m., Dr. Bowen goes across the street to check on them. And he notices Lizzie when he knocks on the door, and whenever Andrew answers it, he notices Lizzie rushing upstairs, and she seems like she's in a hurry, but really before he can process that, Andrew's like, "What do you want?" Because he's kind of a jerk. And Dr. Bowen tells him, "Oh, I'm just coming by to check on you." And Andrew freaks out. He tells Dr. Bowen to leave. He did not ask for this unsolicited house call. He's not going to pay for it. Get out of here. We don't want anything from you. Leave us alone, blah, blah, blah. So Dr. Bowen's probably like, "Damn, dude, okay, I was just trying to be neighborly. I wasn't trying to charge you for anything. I just wanted to know if y'all were all right." But, so he leaves. At 10:30, Lizzie goes to Smith's pharmacy and she attempts to buy prussic acid, which, the Victorians, they loved their absolute poisons as cleaners and face scrubs and medicine and all of that. They just loved it, especially mercury and arsenic and cyanide. But prussic acid is another one. It's very caustic and very, deadly. Yeah. But she's denied. The pharmacy denies her. I don't know if they got a vibe or if they just... what the reason was for that. That's really not ever given in the sources as to why she was denied the prussic acid, but she was. So, and keep in mind, because people point to this as, oh, she was trying to buy poison to poison them. She hadn't been home for the last few days. This is, her first day. She's about to go home. I think she hasn't even gone home from the boarding house yet the day before. And she's denied the poison. So it doesn't make sense that she already did poison them. Because some people point to that. Like, that's why they didn't feel well. That they had been poisoned. But if it was Lizzie, as people suspect, she hadn't been home, and she clearly didn't have any poison because she was trying to buy poison, and they wouldn't sell it to her. Let me get around these little corners here. Okay. So, at noon, Lizzie has lunch with her parents, her father and stepmother. She wouldn't like me calling her mother, or her stepmother, her parent. So, whatever, Lizzie. At 1:30 is whenever her Uncle Morse shows up. He arrives in town. And Andrew and Morse, they sit in the sitting room and they talk from about 2 o'clock to about 4 o'clock. And Lizzie hears a lot of the conversation they're having. It's not said in the sources like what she heard, but it's just said that she was in the room too, so she was present for a lot of their conversations. So she probably heard them talking about property and money and all those such things. Around 7 in the evening, Lizzie goes to visit her friend, Alice Russell, and Miss Russell will later say that Lizzie tells her that she's worried something bad is going to happen to her father because he has enemies. And that's really not elaborated on as to what she meant, who the enemies were, what she thought was going to happen, when, and all that. It's just a comment she made according to Alice Russell, and Alice Russell, testifies on it later. Okay, let me get around the little notches, guys, before I go back to reading my notes and trying to color at the same time. There we go. I'm going to go back in here in these little dots, boop, boop, in the blue, and maybe do them with gold. I think that will pop. I'm sorry. I know I'm getting off track of the story here, but I need to focus on these little ridges, and then I'll get back to talking about the story. There we go. All right, and then at 9 o'clock in the evening on August 3rd, Lizzie returns home and she locks the front door and goes to her room without speaking to anyone. And I'm assuming that they get a lot of this in the house testimony from Bridget, the maid. Because she would be, you know, kind of just the silent witness to everything, because she was the hired help, and rich people treat people, the hired help, like houseplants, and just, you know, do whatever in front of them because they don't notice them most of the time. And we'll get into a theory about Bridget later, but I don't know. Anyway, let's see, at 9:15, Abby goes to bed, and around 10 o'clock, Andrew and Morris, who'd been talking again in the sitting room, they go off to bed. So everybody's going to bed by 10 p.m. For some of you, that might be a little early, but for the rest of us super elderly people like me, that's like, yeah, that's about time to turn in. If you can. I mean, yeah, I go to bed, but I don't go to sleep. And I'm stalling again because I'm trying to get around these little weird shapes before I flip my notes. Because I'm finished with the page. Oh, y'all hear my other dog moving around in the background. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, and I think I forgot to mention earlier that Emma is in New Bedford, Massachusetts. It's like a town over, and it seems to be a place that her and Lizzie have friends at and go quite often whenever they want to go get out of town or whatever. So that's where she is. So everybody goes to bed, wake up, and we are now at August 4th in the morning. And it is 6 a.m. or about 6:30 a.m. in the Borden home, and Abby and Bridget prepare breakfast for the family, and mostly just the men and Lizzie and themselves, of course, but they're the ones up doing everything. By 6:40 to 6:50, Andrew is out emptying the slops. They have some farm animals. So they've got some pigs and some things like that. And he picks up some pears and he goes to the barn. Bridget opens the back door for the Iceman. Oh, you know what? We're going to pause on the coloring. I made maps. Let's see. Hopefully y'all can see these. So this is the first floor. And I made a little pointer too. It's just made out of a chopstick and I just colored it. So to make it easier. So this is the front of the house. This is the front door. This is the back door. This is the door. Yeah, there we go. This is the door that Bridget opens for the Iceman. We got the kitchen back here, and this is just the back entry to the house. Okay. So this is the door Bridget opens at 6:45. And we'll come back to that map here in a little bit. I could have printed them off the internet, but when I can draw my own version, I like to, just to put my own little personal touch, a little extra effort into it, because, you know, that's fun for me. And also, I love maps. I have drawn many. Y'all want to see another one I drew? Probably not, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. This is just one I drew for fun. It's random. It's nowhere real. I just will squiggle some lines sometimes. But I love, love, love maps. And, you know, drawing them for the channel is pretty cool. So, okay, where were we? Alright, by 7 o'clock, they're eating breakfast. Lizzie eats on a tray in her room. She does not join them at the table to eat breakfast because I guess she's either just not ready to get up yet, or she's still salty, or she's plotting. Alright, so 7:45, they're done eating breakfast, and Andrew and Morris go back to the sitting room and talk. These dudes like to sit around and talk a lot. And they talk for about an hour, 8:45. Around that time is when Morris leaves the house. He's going to go visit another niece he has in town and stop by some banks and some other business he's got going on. Allegedly. Alright, let me get around the corners again and we'll get back to the story again. I hope y'all can see this. Yeah, I don't think you can. I'm all off camera here with my left hand in your way. So about the time Morris is leaving the house, Andrew's getting ready to leave in a while, and Abby tells Bridget to wash the outside windows. Now, this sucks ass because it is hot as hell outside, and Bridget is not thrilled about this, but, you know, she does it. She don't like it, but she does it. So, because Bridget is still not feeling well either. Like, everybody still has an upset stomach. Andrew, Abby, and Bridget all still feel like poop. But, unfortunately, Abby doesn't seem to be too worried about Bridget and makes her go outside in the heat and humidity and wash windows. So, Bridget ends up throwing up. And while she's outside washing windows, Abby's inside dusting. And Lizzie's still upstairs, for all we know. So at about 9 o'clock is when Andrew leaves the house. And at that same time, Abby's going up there to clean the guest room that Morris has been staying in. Probably, you know, make the bed and pick up whatever men drop and leave behind on the floor for women to clean up and all that kind of stuff. But, which I guess it's good that Abby helps Bridget and doesn't make her do it all herself, but she sure does seem to make Bridget do the worst of it. Okay, let me get around my edges here. We'll get back to the timeline. So by 9:30, Bridget is cleaning up breakfast and doing the windows, and that takes her about an hour. So, you know, earlier Abby asked her to do the windows, but that was still, I guess, during breakfast and everything. And so once they finish breakfast and clean up the dishes and everything, that's whenever Bridget goes outside to do the windows in the heat of the day while she's battling a food poisoning. So, awesome. I'm missing some of my lines here, but that's okay. We're not trying to make it perfect. We're just trying to make it pleasing to the eye. And once I color that in, it won't be that noticeable. Anyway, so, now this part is going to kind of jump around a little bit because between 9:30 and 10, someone enters the guest room and bludgeons Abby in the head. Can you see that? Head and face, and kills her. Let me color this little corner in, and then I'm going to pull out the map again. Alright, this is the second floor. So this is the stairs from downstairs. This house is kind of weird. Let me see. I want to make sure you guys can see what I'm doing here. Ugh, this crazy camera angle. Alright, there we go. So this is the landing from downstairs. You're walking upstairs. There's a bathroom here. There's no hallways in this house. It's very strange. You have to walk through bedrooms to get to other rooms. So this is the guest room. This is Abby's body. where it's found, but it's not going to be found right away. This is Lizzie's room where she's been all morning. This is her sister Emma's room. And you have to go through, I forgot to add the door there, but you go through Emma's room, through Abby's dressing room, and then this is Andrew and Abby's bedroom. This is the second floor. Okay. Sorry. Oh my gosh. Second floor. Anyway. So, Abby is killed in the guest room probably between 9:30 and 10. But we don't know that yet. And Lizzie's been in her room all morning. There is some discrepancy in that with other sources that say that she told police later that she went out to the barn to get some stuff for a fishing trip she was planning. Like, the trip was, in the sources, they say, like, a few weeks away. So there was no reason for her to be out there that very morning in the heat, digging around looking for stuff in the barn. But there's also, in some sources, she's just in her room up there at that point. Let's get around the edges here. So I'm hoping once I smudge this, it'll look good, but I might go back and add another color on top of it after I get done smudging it. Or maybe I should add the color in before I smudge it, and that way it kind of smudges them together. And then I'll go back and highlight the little lines in between. How's that looking? Not too bad. Okay, next page. Alright, so between 10 and 10:30, neighbors and people outside report seeing Bridget washing the windows, and she even speaks to another girl that they call Kelly Girl outside at the south side of the fence. Remember I told y'all that not long after, oh, I forgot to do these. Right here. Right there. I forgot to do those. So I told y'all that Andrew had left the house. He went, and I could have put it in the timeline, but it really doesn't matter. It's really boring. Like, he went to a bank, and he went to a couple of his businesses and just kind of checked in and everything. And keep in mind, he's still feeling pretty sick, and it's hot, and he's doing a lot of walking and everything. So, at about 10:40... So he's gone about an hour and 40 minutes because he leaves the house around 9. So he returns about 10:40, and he is trying to get in the front door, but his key isn't working for some reason, and he has to knock on the door. And Bridget lets him in. And she says, as she's unlocking the door, she hears Lizzie laughing from the top of the stairs, but she doesn't see her. She just hears her laughing. So she didn't know if Lizzie was playing a joke or something and had locked him out, made his key not work some way, was holding the doorknob. I don't know, but that's just what they say. So, Lizzie would deny this. She would say that she wasn't at the top of the stairs when her father was let in and that she was not laughing. So, okay. Now, when Andrew gets in and he goes to the sitting room, Lizzie goes in there to speak to him. And this is according to Bridget. She would tell, because I guess Andrew asked where Abby was. And Lizzie told him that she had received a note that one of her friends was sick and she went to go see her friend. And so that Abby she wasn't home. She wasn't in the house at the moment. And so Andrew was like, oh, okay, And it says that he has Bridget and Lizzie help him remove his boots because he's not feeling well. and he wants to have a lie down on the sofa and take a little nap because he's still feeling quite nauseous. And so Bridget, after all that, she's still feeling pretty nauseous and yucky as well. And she goes to her room on the 3rd floor to take a nap. So again, we'll bring back the map. I didn't make a map of the 3rd floor because it's just really not important. But what we need to know is that between the 1st floor, where you go up the stairs, and you're coming up the stairs, she's going to have to go through all these doors to get back here to go. This is the staircase that goes, oh, sorry. This is the staircase that goes up to the 3rd floor. So she's going to, like the bed, when you're walking by, the door, the way it swings, and the bed are blocking the view of Abby's body. So she couldn't have seen her in there. Or she didn't, anyway. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is so hard to figure out because it's kind of flipped on my camera. Anyway, so the door and the bed are blocking the view from Abby if you're just walking by. But Bridget would have to walk through all of these rooms to go upstairs to her bedroom. And that's just what she did according to her. Oh no, I dropped a piece of paper. Okay. All right. And let's see here. So they believe, the authorities believe, that between 10:55 and 11, this is a very narrow window, between 10:55 and 11 is when Andrew was murdered in the sitting room. Again, back to the maps. So, front door, parlor, sitting room, Andrew, that's his little body there on the sofa. There's like a fireplace here and a sofa and some other furniture. You can look the pictures up online, but I would not down for really showing people's pictures and death. It seems disrespectful. So I'm not going to post them up here or anything, but they're online if you want to see them. And they're very grainy because it's 1890 freaking 2. So you're mostly looking at gray blobs that you can't really see that much of. All right, let's get these guys colored in around here. So let me get into my next one. So Bridget knows kind of what time it is because she hears the City Hall clock chime for 11 o'clock, which I'm sure many people all around the area depended on this clock to tell what time it was. So they would be paying attention to it. But also, even if you weren't listening for it, it was probably loud and disruptive and annoying and you couldn't not hear it. Now I might go in with some black and some purple, maybe some other colors to put in these pastels before I smudge it so that they kind of smudge together. I think that'll be pretty. Let's take this brighter one. Alright. So again, Bridget hears the clock at 11. So she's only been in her room for a few minutes. Like 15 tops. At 11:10, Lizzie yells for Bridget, "Someone has killed Father. Come quick, help, someone's killed Father," is the gist of what she's screaming. So Bridget is like, probably like, what? And, because she literally just saw him like 10 minutes ago. So she's probably thinking, this is insane. What is happening here? I'm going to get these a little even. I wanted these to kind of look like scary mouths once I got them colored in. Let's go with the black now. Sorry, these aren't very easy to get out, and I can't do it one-handed. Yeah, that's good. Alright, so I know I'm just leaving you guys in suspense. So now this is a very tight next few minutes in the timeline here. I mean, it's literally kind of minute by minute here. So, you know, Bridget runs downstairs and Lizzie tells her to run and get the doctor, Dr. Bowen, who lives across the street, excuse me, not next door, across the street. So Bridget runs to go do that. And, I mean, it's literally just across the street. So this is 11:12 is when she sends Bridget to get the doctor. And by 11:13, she's back and telling Lizzie that he's not home. And so then Lizzie sends Bridget for Alice Russell. Not sure what she could do, but for some reason that's what she does. She sends her for Alice. And I guess she was a nearby neighbor as well, because she doesn't live very far. Alright. I always do that. Okay. So, another woman named Mrs. Churchill sees Lizzie outside on the street at 11:14 and asks her, you know, like, what's happening? And Lizzie calls over to her and says, someone killed Father. At 11:14, at the same time she's telling that, Johnny Cunningham, which I guess was just another neighbor or some dude out on the street, it didn't really say, he calls the police. By 11:20, Dr. Bowen, wherever he was, he's returned home. And so his wife tells him, you know, what's happening, and he runs across the street to the Borden house. Sorry, let me get this finished in. Is that popping a little more? Yeah. Alright, cool. Let me get my paint pen going here. Alright. Yes, I like the way that looks. I might even do some little gold dots on the inside of there. I love to layer the colors a little bit. Gives them more depth and definition. I was thinking I might color the skeleton gold. What do you guys think? Let's jump in and do it. Alright, so Dr. Bowen sees, at 11:20, Dr. Bowen sees Andrew's body and asks for a sheet to cover him. At the same time, John Cunningham is checking around the house and finds the cellar door locked. Alright, I want to get this little details right. Sorry, I'm so blind. I have to really focus on these little parts here. There must have been, like, police nearby or whatever, because Officer Allen arrives between, like, 11:20 and 11:21. Because, I mean, by now they've raised the hue and cry and the whole damn neighborhood's screaming about it. Everybody's heard something's going on at the Borden house. They may not know what, but they know something is happening and likely someone is dead. So, police start arriving. So, when Officer Allen arrives, he's met at the door by Lizzie and or he's met at the door by Dr. Bowen and sees Lizzie sitting at the kitchen table alone. Which, I mean, if she didn't do it, she's probably in shock. If she did do it, she's probably in shock. You know, either way. But we'll get into that in a minute. So he sees Lizzie sitting there, and about that time is whenever Alice Russell and Mrs. Churchill arrive together. And Officer Allen decides he needs to go back to the police station to get, you know, more people involved in this. And Dr. Bowen leaves the house to send Emma a telegram in New Bedford to tell her what's going on so that she can be informed. Let me finish his noggin, and I'll come back. Once that's given a few more minutes to dry, I'll come back with a pen and fix those spots that it covered up. It's such tiny work. I need to focus on this, but I can't read my notes at the same time. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, so that's so the telegram sent to Emma is stamped, time stamped, which helps kind of put all this in a proper timeline, and it's time stamped for 11:32. So all of this is happening extremely quickly. And they, you know, the people that see the body, they see Andrew, and he is slumped over on the couch, and he's been struck 10 to 11 times, and it's so bad one of his eyeballs is split open, so pretty gruesome. And his wounds are still bleeding, so that they know that means this just happened, which, based on how soon after it was that Bridget and Lizzie had seen him, like, they knew it had just happened. Even back then, they knew that much, thankfully. Let's get around here. Once I get around here and the ribs and all that and colored in, I will go back and fill some stuff in. Get rid of some of this dead space here with the white. Get that little spinal column colored in. I don't know what this dude's name should be, but he's fabulous, isn't he? Alright, gonna turn you upside down for a minute, fella. Okay, need to turn my page. So between 11:25 and 11:30, Lizzie asks Bridget to go check for Mrs. Borden at the friend's house she supposedly went to. And then at 11:35, the George Petty, he's a former resident of the house, which is, the address is 92 2nd Street. So they say former resident. I don't know if, like, he owned the house prior or if he was like a boarder and he lived there with them. It didn't say. It just said he's a former resident. So, because I don't really know how long they've been living in this house. I know at one point they had a different home, their childhood home, because that's the one that he sold to them for $1, and then he bought it back for $5,000 a few weeks later. So I don't know how long they've been living in this house. Anyway, Churchill informs because George Petty comes back with Dr. Bowen. I guess somebody went to go get him for whatever reason. And Churchill informs them of Mrs. Borden, and Bridget is fetching the doctor's wife, Phoebe, don't know why, and Officer Patrick Doherty and Deputy Sheriff Wixon arrive. This is all happening like right at the same time around 11:35 a.m. Just, like 15 to 20 minutes after Andrew's body has been discovered. And, like Lizzie is telling Bridget to go find Mrs. Borden at whatever friend's house she went to and all that. Because she, knows that her stepmother needs to be informed that Andrew has been murdered. And some people point to this and they say, wow, she really, really wanted, people to know or to realize that Abby Borden wasn't there. Like, we need to hurry up and discover her body. Which maybe that's what the plan was, but maybe she really did think that she was at a friend's house, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So between 11:35 and 11:40, Wixon and Bowen check Andrew's pockets and they remove his watch, which I think is weird, but you can't account for what people did in 1892 in crime scenes. It was kind of crazy. Oh no, am I running out of gold? Crap. Oh, there we go. I was going to say, I thought I just opened this pen. Y'all, I have so many paint pens. Yesterday I wanted to use some and they some of them dried out and I had to throw a bunch away. But anyway. So the cops start questioning Lizzie kind of about what is going on, what's your morning been like, did you see anything, did you hear anything, yada yada yada. And Lizzie says that she heard a strange scraping noise, which if she told them that, then the story about, oh, I wasn't in the house when it happened, I was in the barn, I've only seen that in a couple of sources, so I don't really know if that's just something that was added later, said later, what have you. I don't know. Okay, we're going to give these teeth a little jump here, because we want them to be scary, right? Sorry, I had to focus on these little parts, so I'll get back to the story in just a second. And that gives his skeletonness time to dry so that when I go back there with the black ink, it'll show up better, hopefully. Sometimes these paint pens can be a little bit difficult to write over or color over. I'll have to go back in there with the black ink and go around these two, because this is a wide-tipped, and all my other silver with the skinny tips were dried up, so this is all I have right now, and it's kind of bulky to be doing on these finer details, but it's fine. It'll work. Is it? Oh yeah, it's kind of popping in the camera a little bit. A little bit. I wish the gold was as shiny as the silver is. I don't know. On camera, he probably just looks kind of brown, doesn't he? I don't know. Or actually, he looks like he's blending in. Oh, yeah, that's cool. Anyway. Alright, I'm almost done, guys. And then I'll get back to the timeline. I'm sorry, but these just... I'm not doing a very good job on these right now because I'm not turning it at an angle well enough. Okay, let me get this last one. Okay. Ooh, there we go. We're going to give it a second to dry. Alright, so between like 11:40 and 11:45, this is when Uncle Morris returns home to the Borden home, and he's like, what the hell is happening? And so he's kind of like, they tell him what's going on, and some people thought it was strange, but he kind of spends the rest of the afternoon out in the backyard away from all the chaos, which I don't know, if I was an active crime scene, I probably wouldn't want to be in there either. And it's probably really gross and stressful and scary and terrifying, and he's probably in somewhat of shock as well. Doop, doop, doop. Doop, doop, doop. See, I think that's going to be pretty. Yeah, it's doing pretty well. Let's go ahead and make the fingers and toes gold. That way they pop off the page too. I'm not that great at skeletons, but I really like drawing them. You'll hear my phone going off. I tried to turn down my ringer. Okay, so by 11:50, oh, I'm sorry, I need to backtrack just like 5 minutes, because between 11:35 and 11:40, I guess, is whenever they realized that Abby wasn't at a friend's house and that she has been killed and she's upstairs dead, and her body has been discovered in this time frame. And I guess they take Morris in and he sees the bodies, and then he speaks to Lizzie for a minute, and then that's whenever he goes outside for the rest of the afternoon. By 11:55, Lizzie goes to her room, which is right next to one of the crime scenes, and she kind of stays in there. It's insane they let her do that, but again, like I said, there's no accounting for protocol in 1892. Let's get this little guy. Do. Sorry, I know I just quit talking, didn't I? Alright, Assistant Marshal Fleet arrives and questions Lizzie in her room, and he makes a remark says something about your mother, and she snaps back and says, she is not my mother. That woman is not my mother. My mother died when I was little, and she is my stepmom. And Assistant Marshal Fleet was like, well, okay, goodness. So between 11:50 and noon, Bridget takes Medley, Fleet, Doherty down to the cellar, and down there they find the handle to a hatchet. Now, I don't even have to read off my notes for this. I know this part so well. So they see the hatchet there, and it's just the handle. The head of the hatchet, the blade part, is not present. And they're like, oh, this is freshly broken. Which, I mean, yeah, you can kind of tell when something has been freshly broken, or if it was broken a long time ago. But then they decide that the dust on it is different dust than what is in the rest of the basement, or the cellar, whatever you want to call it. But they don't say how it's different, just that it is. And this handle to the hatchet, it's not like just laying out. They find it in a box on a shelf. So I honestly don't even know if they had the actual, like, handle of the murder weapon, or if they just found an old broken tool and assumed that was part of it. And we'll never know. We will never know that. How's he showing up on camera, guys? Anyway, so between like 12:15 and 12:20, Officer Harrington is questioning Lizzie again in her room, and they say she's wearing like a pink wrap, which I don't understand, other than like, what were you wearing at the time and day of the murder? And that comes into play later, but he makes note that she's wearing a pink wrap, which a wrap, for most women, we all know that that is something that you wear over something. So I don't think that's all she was wearing, especially back in Victorian era times where women dressed so modestly, and she was known to dress very modestly. So I doubt she was like hanging out in her robe with nothing on underneath just after her parents were murdered. So, but he makes note that she's wearing a pink wrap. Which, you know, was she trying to cover something up on the clothing she had on underneath? Maybe. How's that looking? That looks a lot better. Yeah. I'm going to go back in and kind of color in the teeth now. See, like I said, you can't go over it very well, but you can go around it, kind of, and I can feel it in, I guess, in the non-metallic part where I use the markers. So by 3 p.m. the bodies are being photographed, and like 3:30 or so, there's being crime scene photos taken. Again, I'm not going to show them. If you want to see them, they're easily available online. They're very grainy and you can't see much. There's a lot of overexposure with light and glares and everything, but they're there if you want to see them. So, you know, Emma, the sister, had been in New Bedford, and she got the telegram at 11:32, and by 3:40 she's leaving New Bedford on a train to head home. Now this next part is weird. I get an autopsy, I totally get that, but this part I don't understand. By 4 o'clock that same day, doctors are removing Andrew and Abby's stomachs. I don't know if they decided they were going to look for poison or why that part was so important. But, I mean, you know, they're performing... I wouldn't call it... Well, I guess if they're removing their stomachs, it is an autopsy, but it's a post-mortem of the bodies, you know. Trying to figure out what happened and everything, and that's whenever they determined that Abby was killed quite a bit before Andrew was killed. So up to an hour or more before Andrew was killed. We almost done here, guys. Thanks for holding on with me. Okay, there we go. Oh, let me get the orange around the orange part. It just looks better whenever it's more defined and the colors are kind of deeper in there. Now I think we're going to go through with a different pastel, maybe a red, and try to fill in a little bit of this grayness and everything with a little bit of red overtones. Okay, so Emma is back in Fall River by 5 o'clock. And a state detective that had been called in arrives about 5:30. His name is George F. Seaver, and he came in from Taunton, which I don't know how far away that was, but you know, he's there to help investigate. By 5:30, Andrew and Abby's bodies are being taken to the Undertaker. So I guess they kind of completed their little post-mortem or autopsy, whatever you want to call it, and now the Undertaker could start preparing their bodies for burial. Okay, let's get the smudge on. By 8:45, Officer Joseph Hyde, he's kind of standing outside the house because there was a double homicide there. So there's still people and police and everything coming and going. And this guy sees Lizzie and Alice go down to the cellar, which, they still probably needed like coal and things like that. But he just says he sees it. Don't know if there's anything nefarious about it or not. It's just seen. And then at 9 o'clock, Hyde sees Lizzie go back to the cellar by herself. So that's the day and events of August 4th and the witness statements of what everybody saw and did on August 4th. So that'll bring us into the actual investigation. Now, no blood was ever found at that time on Lizzie's hands or anywhere else on her person. Like, nobody said, yes, she was wearing the pink wrap, but nobody said, like, oh, she was covered in blood or anything like that. Nobody said that at the time, which at the time, right whenever it happened, had she been like a bloody covered mess, it would have been a lot more obvious that she was the one that did this, but it wasn't obvious. So they thought, an intruder came in or was already in the house somehow and somehow killed them both, and people just didn't know about it. So that point is made in the investigation. Woohoo! That's coming out cool. The hatchet handle found in the box in the cellar had different dust. It was freshly broken. And so Lizzie had said she had told Andrew that Abby had received a note from a friend that they were sick. Therefore, Abby had gone to go see them. When Lizzie was asked about this, apparently she said, yeah, that's what I thought. I thought she went to go see her friend. And they were like, well, where's this note she received? And she was like, I don't know. It must have already gotten thrown out, which, okay. But they never found a note requesting Abby to go see a sick friend. So that's another part of the story that we just don't know if that's true or not. So on August 6th, the funerals are held, so that's 2 days after the murders. On August 7th, Alice Russell says she sees Lizzie burning a blue dress in the kitchen stove, and Lizzie claims it is stained with paint, and that's why she's burning it in the stove. Well, that is very weird. And according to everybody, the day of the murders, Lizzie was wearing a blue dress, and according to Alice Russell, it's the same blue dress that she was burning in the stove. Had it had blood on it that day, I feel like they would have noticed. I also think that it is very strange to burn a dress that has paint on it. Back then, in the kitchen, of all things, like, yeah, you might have a burn pile outside that you burn trash and everything, but just to burn it in the house seems weird. To burn it at all seems weird. I feel like they especially as frugal as this family was, at some point they would have just reused the fabric for cleaning rags or something. I don't know. It's very strange. If it happened at all. Lizzie, I don't know. In some sources it says she denies doing this, in some it says she admits to it but says it was just paint, so I don't know. But it prompts the judge, Blaisdell of the 2nd District Court, to charge Lizzie with the murders. Like, for him, that's enough probable cause. And August 9th, the inquest is held, and it's closed to the public. On the 11th, Lizzie is arrested. On the 12th, she enters a not guilty plea. And by August 22nd, a preliminary hearing held. Judge Blaisdell finds that there is probable cause to try Lizzie for murder. On December 2nd, Lizzie is indicted. So this is December of the end of the year of 1892, and the trial begins in June 5th of 1893. Kind of during the whole thing, it was said that there wasn't enough evidence. Like, a lot of people didn't think Lizzie did it, and that there wasn't enough evidence, and I guess that's what the jury thought too, because she is acquitted on June 20th of the murders. So what does this mean for Lizzie? Well, it means she's about to be a very wealthy woman, because her and her sister are gonna inherit everything. And they do. And, you know, they live pretty much quiet lives after that and everything. But, of course, Lizzie is like people believe she killed her parents and got away with it. So she's seen as a murderess. Now, there are some sources that say she kind of embraced this and, like, liked the fact that it put people off. And then there are others that say that she didn't like it. So, we'll never know the truth about that one. But, you know, whatever. I think she just got tired of the public scrutiny and everything after a while. But, I don't know. You know, she seemed to have kind of a morbid sense of humor. So maybe she was okay with it. But then again, it's one thing to have a morbid sense of humor. And then it's one thing to be like, oh, I'm fine with people thinking I murdered my parents. Cool, you know. So, I don't know. Now, that's going to bring us into the theories. The main theory is, of course, that Lizzie did it and got away with it. There are theories that, and I didn't tell this in the immediate part of the story, but during the investigation, people were saying that there had been a Portuguese man kind of hanging around the neighborhood for the last few days, and they thought he was responsible. But this kind of plays into just like that fear of foreigners, and like there had been a rash of like break-ins in the neighborhood. Not to say that that Portuguese guy did it. I think if they knew he'd done it, they would have, you know, done something about it. But apparently he didn't do anything because he was never brought up on any charges for anything. So I think he was just kind of existing as a Portuguese person in a racist country. Another theory is that Bridget was involved, and that Bridget and Lizzie had an affair going on. The reason I don't believe this is because I think if they did, Lizzie would not call her by some other woman's name. If she had like any sort of care or affection for her, she would have called her by her actual name. But who knows? You know? Maybe it was a power dynamic thing. There's no evidence for it. And even Bridget kind of gave evidence against Lizzie, you know, a little bit. She was like, I don't know. Like, she kind of was the one that took the lead on things after the bodies were discovered and gave contradictory evidence and, you know, all that. So there was no forced entry and nothing was stolen from the house. So I think that's kind of why people lean more towards that Lizzie did it. But who knows? Another theory is Andrew's enemies that Lizzie had spoken about. Like maybe one of his bank people or whatever had done it. had it done for whatever reason. Another theory is that Emma and Lizzie did it together. Like Emma was out of town on purpose. Lizzie was gone for most of the time and then only home the night before for a reason. So there's lots of theories thrown around. We'll never know. I don't know really where I stand. Like half of me thinks, of course Lizzie did it. You know, if she was on the same floor at the same time when Abby was murdered, then how could she not have heard that happening? How, you know, she didn't hear a scream or anything. So that some of it seems like, well, of course she did it. And then some of it is like, well, maybe she wasn't. If she really was out in the barn looking for fishing stuff when it happened, then maybe she wasn't in the house. It's hard to tell because some of the accounts have been changed over time and all that, but it's generally accepted that Lizzie did it and got away with murder. She never, like, had a deathbed confession where she did it or anything like that, so I don't know. Let's fill in this skull a little bit more now that the top coat's dry. So, I mean, what do you think? Oh, another theory is that Uncle Morris did it to, you know, further some sort of business interest he had, or perhaps he had an inheritance coming from Andrew and was trying to speed that along, or maybe if he owed Andrew money or something, a debt could be forgotten if Andrew was dead or something like that. Now, that theory, like, I kind of lean towards that one because I feel like it, you know, I don't know what their relationship was like, Morse and Andrew, and, you know, had they been getting along all this time? Maybe they were friends. It seems like he, you know, was well known to the family, so maybe they kept in touch, but maybe Andrew loaned him a sum of money and it was coming time to pay that money back and Morris didn't have it, and so he killed Andrew. Because it seems like Lizzie and Emma inherited pretty much everything. So, other than maybe a forgiven debt or something, I don't know what Morris would have had to gain from it. Maybe he thought he was going to inherit stuff, and then whenever, you know, it was over and the murders had happened, he found out during the reading of the will that he didn't inherit anything. I don't know, because that's obviously private to the family. Like, we don't have any real way of knowing that right now. So, just interesting theories. I don't know about the theory that Bridget and Lizzie having a relationship, unless something soured after the murders and Bridget wasn't gonna, like, cover for her anymore. But I still feel like if they were having some sort of relationship before then, that Lizzie probably would have bothered to call her by her actual name and not the old maid's name. So, I don't know. Alright, let's see if we can get some of this. I want y'all to see how it kind of lights up under the light. Maybe if I turn one of these off, it'll... Yeah, that's better. See how it kind of sparkles now? Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lizzie Borden, a classic. And if you have any comments, shoot me a comment. If you have any theories, let me know what you think. I would love to know. And if you enjoyed this, give me a like and maybe a subscribe. I would love it. I'm trying to build up more subscribers. And like I said, life has been a little crazy for me the last 2 months. I was helping a friend out who had had surgery and everything, so I haven't been home very much. But I'm back home now. So I plan on belting out a few more episodes for you guys over the next few weeks. I did have time to write up a bunch of scripts. I'm going to take advantage of that and do as much recording as I can here in the next couple of weeks and everything, and get some more episodes posted. But I appreciate your time, and give me a like or a subscribe if you're enjoying my content, and I'll see you here in a few days when I put out another one. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Oh, Abby says bye, too. Bye, everybody. Bye. Bye, bye, bye.